what exactly are kinks? Kinks are, to my understanding of this, and the work I've done around this for like years now, kinks are energetic blockages to the expression of who you authentically are. And so at some point, some part of you got shamed, or maybe it was seriously rejected, or there's a part of you that felt like you were not enough or too much or something along those lines. And this part of you got split off and it got thrown down deep into your shadow. And that is crying out for release. That, let's say it's shame. That shame wants to be expressed, or this part of you wants to be expressed. But you're not allowing it to be expressed because that's wrong, or that's immoral, or that's not who I'm supposed to be, or that's inappropriate, or whatever. And so it doesn't get expressed, but it doesn't go away. It's just like you just threw it in the back of your closet and threw a bunch of pile of clothes on top of it, and you're like, the thing's not there anymore. But like the thing is there, it's just now radioactive because it just builds charge in the corner of your closet. And then what ends up happening is like it's looking for a pressure release valve. And the most immediate one, because it's both a physiological somatic release as well as a psychological one, emotional release, is through your sexuality. And so this thing that got split off and put in the shadow builds in charge until it's like it's burning you like a coal or like an ember inside, and it needs to like vent off the steam. And so it looks for the pressure release valve of orgasm, ejaculation, sexual release. It's venting off this charge that's not being transmuted and worked with, and it's venting it off that way. The example that I have, so actually going back to people would ask me when I was doing those Q&As on my stories like years ago, the most common question I would get from women when it came to men's kinks was about cuckolding. Cuckolding, for those of you who don't know, like cuckolding is a man who gets off to watching his woman be intimate with another man. And he just has to watch her like experience a bunch of pleasure with this man. Okay. For years, when I would put up question boxes, like if there was ever a question pertaining to like men's sexuality or kinks, it would be like, why does my guy get off to cuckolding? Why is my guy like, why is he asking me to like bang another dude in front of him? Like, what is this? And for years, I asked this question, I'm like, I don't have an answer to this, but this is like the most common like kink from a male perspective that I was getting asked about. I'm like, what in the hell? So eventually I went and like, all right, let's see if I can figure this out. And I found 2 books on this. One was called Insatiable Wives. And it was just this really like pro cuckolding thing where the guy, like the author was clearly like into cuckolding and was just trying to like talk about why it's great. And I'm like, all right, I'm not going to get any value out of this. So the second book was called The Psychology of the Cuckold Fetish. I'm like, seems like a great place to start. And this guy, I start reading this. I'm like, okay, I'm starting to understand like what this is. And basically what he says is it's eroticized inadequacy. Eroticized inadequacy. So for example, it's a man who, let's say, his ego is he's feeling very, I'm the man. I'm super awesome. I'm like way better than a bunch of other people, whatever. He's got this perspective. Well, almost certainly somewhere in the shadow is some very oppositional quality. If he thinks he's like way superior and he's totally a badass man, there's another part of him that feels like that's not the case. That's why he's compensating over here as hard as he is. And for a lot of guys who are compensating like that in the first place, they're often compensating because they have this deep internalized shame around inadequacy. He feels inadequate as a man. He feels inadequate even as a boy. He feels inadequate in his masculinity. He's not good enough. Inadequate. And so if that hasn't been addressed and it's this deep pain and shame around that thing in particular, that just stays deep inside him. And it's always just burning. Like the shame of I am inadequate in my masculinity is always burning. It's just always there. And well, until he does the inner work of like going down and actually meeting that part of himself or facing it or working with that to transmute the shame into, wait, I can actually let this go. I don't need to hold this to the same extent. Or here's a healthy way of expressing it in a way that I don't feel inadequate anymore because I'm transforming it. He's not working with it actively. He's trying to hide that in the shadow, as most of us do when it comes to our deepest pain or shame. So he hides that inadequacy down there. But the inadequacy doesn't go away. It just continues to build in charge until it has to vent itself off some way. And the main pressure release valve is your sex drive. And so then that shame around inadequacy gets eroticized into being attracted to situations that make him feel inadequate. How can I just recreate the internal inadequacy externally? That's just all that happens. And so, like, what would make you feel more inadequate as a man than watching your partner experience a bunch of pleasure with another man while you have to watch? You know, it's like just brutalizing the inadequate part of yourself internally. And that's why guys are attracted to that. Not all men, obviously, but yeah. So that was the example that I had as far as like, it's a kink. Think of the term kink. Like when else would you use the word kink? Probably like you're talking about a hose. You're like, oh, the water's not moving out of the hose because there's a kink in the hose, right? It got kinked, so the water is not flowing properly. And I think that's exactly right. There's these energetic channels in your body, in your psyche, that are supposed to be flowing, and you're supposed to express yourself in the fullest expression of yourself. But if at some point, shame, pain, wounding, socialization, conditioning, if some of those put a block to the expression of that part of yourself, there's now a kink in the flow of that energy channel within your psyche. But that doesn't go away. It just, the hose is now just building all of this pressure because the water can't flow out properly. And you got to vent the pressure. Otherwise the hose is just going to burst. And your psyche knows this. And so it's just like, all right, what's another outlet? Redirect towards sexuality. Shoot it out that way. And that's, I strongly suspect like this is how like the kinks are operating in your psyche, is like they are energetic. They're blockages to the flows of your energy channels. So yeah, that's what I want to go into on that.